Recently, we went to the Rhode Island Computer Museum, and it brought back a lot of memories for me about some of the old computers that we had and the computers that I worked with. And it brought back memories all the way back to when I was in college. And for the life of me, I can't remember why or when I actually started doing computer stuff. But sometime when I was an undergraduate, I learned about computers, and RPI had an old 36050, IBM 36050 computer that I learned to program with.
Oh, okay.
And it was fun. The probably the best computer course I ever took was comparative computing languages, and in one class we had it was a 5-week summer class, and we had to learn 6 different computer languages to do the same thing in each one of the languages. So it was COBOL, Fortran, PL1, Lisp, and PL1. So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. So then when I went to graduate school at RPI, I learned, well, my master's project was about a clinical analysis of low back health factors. And we had to design questionnaires that health professionals had to fill out the forms after they examined patients, and then they would send them back to us, and then we actually had an old 029 key punch that we rented for our project, and that was in my office. And so Mike Silverstein and we worked on that project, and I did all the computer work on it using a lot of what they call statistical subroutines, SPSS, I believe, and that ran on the mainframe. And we did a lot of correlation to see if there was any correlation between what people did for a living, what kind of cars they drove, and whether that was causing low back pain. So,
low back pain. Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, that just at least gives me an idea of what this can happen to them. I thought that would be, someplace completely out of the way. I'm glad that that's what people look at to find out what's going on here.
So even though my master's degree was in engineering, I was predominantly working on computer science stuff. So when I graduated, I interviewed at a number of places, and one of which was Burroughs in Detroit, where
I'll never forget that. Let me tell you, I was involved in that. Like my brain was like, figure it out, Dad, just figure it out.
Where I joined the Burroughs Ski Club.
Oh.
And that's how I met my beautiful wife, Sue.
What was I doing over there?
I think you were president of the ski club at the time.
I don't remember at the time.
And we had a lot of fun. We would meet, I don't know, every couple of weeks in a bar, close to the office. But when I first started there, I worked on quality assurance for some of the software they were developing at Burroughs. And of all things, I had to go in the middle of the night sometimes and rent a mainframe.
I didn't do that. I honestly didn't do that.
And I had to drive to the New Center area in Detroit and go in the middle of the night and I would get a 4-hour block of mainframe time, where I would.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I would boot up the mainframe, and I would install the software, and I would run a number of tests to see if there were any bugs or errors in the software. So that was, a learning experience for me.
I think so, yes,
Yeah.
because it was a little bizarre.
And during the week, we had these teletypes. We would program stuff in a separate little room with a bunch of teletypes, and we would key in our programs and save them to disk, and then we would do lots of different things with them.
Okay.
But subsequent to that, so that was, I think, on a Burroughs 5500. I was assigned to a project where I was developing software on a medium system called the Burroughs 1700, which it was just me and I think one other guy, and we would have the whole computer to ourselves anytime we wanted, and it was kept in a separate room and right near where my office was.
Well, they were doing it in a way that you could do that,
Mm-hmm.
because they're really doing this, and that's what they
Yeah.
want to do, and figure it out and do a good job at it.
So after that, we got married, and then we decided that we wanted to move somewhere else. So I ended up taking a job at Mohasco. Mohasco was in Gardner, Massachusetts, and they made carpets.
They did what?
They made carpets.
Oh,
So I was software development manager at Mohasco, and I had to go visit the manufacturing facilities, which all happened to be in the South. And I had to wear a 3-piece suit, even though it was incredibly hot. But
that's what I was about to say. Why were they doing that at a time of the day and the time of the year where that didn't make sense?
So I worked at Mohasco, and then we developed what's called a distribution management system. That
We
was
get what?
a distribution management system.
A
Which would-
distribution.
'Cause-
Okay.
Because Mohasco owned a whole bunch of carpet distributors, and we tested it out in Syracuse, New York. And at that time, I think we had adopted Matthew, but I would have to go to Syracuse, New York, to work with the people and test it out and make sure that everything worked right. And while I was in Syracuse, you would drive with me from Peck's Lake all the way to Syracuse, and then you and Matthew would go in the car, and you would drive from Syracuse to Detroit to visit family.
Okay.
So it was just you and Matt in the car, and he was a baby,
He was a baby.
He was a toddler,
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you would go visit with family, and several times you tried to drive from Syracuse to Detroit, and there were snowstorms. I mean, big, big snowstorms. And the thruway was closed. So you had to turn around and come back because you couldn't get to Detroit. So that was sort of an interesting sidebar. So we finished developing that software, that distribution software at the distributor in Syracuse. And then after we finished with that, then we needed to install the software in our first site, which was in California. So what would happen was I would go to California for a week, go to San Francisco.
They insist that all this stuff has to go everywhere.
Yep.
Okay.
But I also had to develop quite a chart on how to utilize the new software and install it. So I had this great big, what they call a PERT chart, which was a big flow chart about what had to be done first, second, third. So now I'm getting a little confused about the timing, because after going back and forth 3 or 4 times, I did a financial analysis and said, why don't you just move us, you and me, to California for 3 months, and we will finish the installation and get it done in a hurry. So this had to be before Matthew, by the way. So they moved us to California. We actually drove to California in my Mustang, and we got to I think we went to Detroit first around New Year's time, and then from then, after we visited at Christmas and New Year's, we drove the rest of the way to California. So, and they rented us a nice apartment, and they paid for mileage to drive out there, and they paid for meals and a nice short-term apartment.
That's common sense. I'm shocked that they just went over common sense. That was excellent of them to do that, rather than have to go through every little. Oh, but you forgot that they were 6 and you didn't know that it was all kind of nonsense. I mean, it's not nonsense, but if you get going in the middle of it and you find yourself going crazy, yeah, then you need something weird.
So at that point, I was more into the application software, and in particular manufacturing systems.
Yep.
So
yeah, it sure was. I remembering that part of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was a lot of fun. And then, unfortunately, what happened was Mohasco decided they were going to move from Amsterdam, New York, down to Atlanta, Georgia. And we didn't want to move there. We said, no, forget it. We're not going to do this. So at the time, we were still living at Peck's Lake, I believe. And I saw this little advertisement for a job in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Oh, that's a tough one.
So we decided that we were going to go, so I applied for that job. And they invited us, both you and I, to fly from Albany all the way to Fairbanks, Alaska for job interviews. Because they wanted someone who could handle McCormick and Dodge financial software. And even though I wasn't really a financial guy, but they wanted to hire me anyway. And they were going to move us to Alaska.
Well, that was very much of a, I mean, I was in and out. So it was really, all of that was very necessitated. You really had to figure out. I was looking at it and saying, what do they want from us? What are they going to do with these things? And I would just shake my head.
So it was a little bit crazy, because we flew up there, and because of the time change, it was so far.
Right.
And somehow I ended up weaseling that we ended up going first class. So we went first class on the airline up to Alaska, and we got up to Fairbanks, and because of the time change, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning our time. So my prospective boss met us at the airport and brought us out to dinner at 3 o'clock in the morning. And we got to the restaurant, and I couldn't eat. I just couldn't eat. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, I can't eat.
Well, I would agree with that. And if there were any other, like, wives or anybody around that was looking at, what the hell is wrong with you people?
So I think that we got there like on a Saturday. And then Monday, I went and I did my interviews. And in the meantime, you were looking for a job. So you went to the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, and within one day they offered you a job.
Mm-hmm.
So that same Monday, they offered me a job. So we both had job offers within 3 days of getting to Alaska. It was pretty amazing. So we weren't going to fly back until that following Friday. So we just went around Alaska. We looked around. We went to Denali National Park. We saw Mount McKinley, and at the time, I think it was in the springtime. It was near our anniversary, but it was sort of weird because at one point, so we went out and we celebrated. We had a celebration dinner for our anniversary, and we got out of the restaurant at like 10 o'clock at night, and guess what? It was still daylight out because of the midnight sun.
The midnight sun.
The midnight sun. So we had a nice time. We looked around Fairbanks. We looked at the cost of living. We looked at houses, and we looked at where we might want to stay. And then I didn't give them an answer right away. They wanted an answer. So, went out to the airport, and I was working with a software called Culinet at the time. And I had with a little carry-on that said Culinet on it.
Yep, that's whenever all the stuff around here looks like that.
Yeah. So we got to the airport, and we're waiting for our plane to leave. And somebody came up to me and said to me, "Do you know IDMS?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been working with it for years." And I said, "Oh, are you looking for a job in Alaska?" So somebody else wanted to offer me a job in Alaska, in Fairbanks. So that was sort of fun. And then we flew back, and it was a really long flight. I mean, we were flying for hours over mountains and glaciers and snowfields.
Did you have a lovely time?
Well, what it said to us was that Fairbanks, Alaska was really far away from our families.
But that's not what you wanted to do. So this is different when you actually can put your mind, you can figure out, oh, this is what it is.
It was a lovely place. I mean, beautiful place. And, we had been living, 2.5 miles down a dirt road at Peck's Lake.
That's right.
And we had a nice, we loved Alaska, but it was too far because we just sort of said, if one of our, whether your parents or my family, if they got sick or anything, then it would be too expensive just to fly home and visit with them or go to a funeral. So we decided we weren't going to do that. So I ended up, when they actually made the announcement that Mohaska was going to move to Atlanta, the day after they made that announcement, I got a call from a headhunter saying, "Have I got a job for you, Joe Harden?" And it was at General Electric in, where was it?
Well, they heard about it and they wanted it.
So, and they knew that I was really big into manufacturing software and systems and stuff like that. So, I never interviewed anywhere else. I went over to GE, and then they offered me a job to go work at GE in Waterford, New York, which was a lot of fun. I really had a lot of fun.
With all the people around?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's nice.
Now, when I went to work there, they were doing all of their systems on Honeywell computers through a time-sharing service that GE owned. And when I was there, me and the IT manager, we decided that we wanted to move over to the Cullinet manufacturing system because it had the functionality to support what's called an inverted bill of materials structure, which was because what they did is they took silicon ore and they took methyl chloride and they mixed it all together and they made silicone caulk out of it, which was sort of cool. But I had to wear a hard hat, and every year they would buy me steel-toed shoes, and I would still have to dress up, but it was a lot of fun. I just enjoyed it. So then after a while, I don't know why, I ended up. So I mean, I did lots of different stuff there. We even bought what's called an Appalisa computer, one of the first graphical computers that was available. Very expensive at the time, so I helped them use that. I helped them do some quality control stuff and some manufacturing stuff. So I don't know. After a while, because what we had sort of hoped is that, because it was a long drive from Peck's Lake to Waterford, New York, where I worked. And we actually had to get an apartment in Schenectady so I could easily commute to Waterford. And then at the time, I think we bought our first computers. We bought a Radio Shack color computer, and which got hooked up to a TV and had a little tape drive, cassette tape drive. And then you learned how to program in BASIC. And then you ended up teaching a class at the Schenectady Girls Club, and you taught little girls how to program in BASIC. So I think you enjoyed that at the Girls Club. And then at some point, we had hoped that we would end up moving to, I would be able to switch jobs to work at another GE facility closer to Peck's Lake, and then that didn't pan out. So we were pissed off about that. We said, no, we're not going to do this. So then what happened next was that a job came available in Gardner, Massachusetts.
What happened?
A job became available in Gardner, Massachusetts.
Oh,
so
popped up.
Yeah. So we ended up moving to Ashburnham.
Ah.
And I would work in Gardner, and it was only like 20 minutes to work, and that was a lot of fun. I did a lot of good stuff there, trying to help them organize and straighten out things.
The whole thing,
yeah,
whether or not if they knew what was going on.
Exactly. So I had a lot of fun. I worked for this guy called Steve Lundstedt.
Oh, I remember the name.
You remember Steve Lundstedt? And he was selling his big station wagon. So we moved to Sunset Lake, which wasn't that far from Gardner. And then I think our first big home computer was an IBM PC, one of the original IBM PCs. And we had it at home down in the basement, finished basement area. And Matthew was very smart, computer literate. And one day I caught him downstairs, and he was taking the manual from the IBM PC, and he was going through all of the commands. And it started with the letter A, and then B, and then C. But luckily I stopped him before he got to the letter F, because in the letter F was a format command. And if you typed in format without indicating what disk drive, it would totally wipe out the C drive. So luckily I stopped him. And but he enjoyed working on that too. He had a lot of fun. Um,
See, that's an interesting thing that I never really put down into any kind of that sort of, what's going on when they're leaving, but they're sort of like not leaving. They're moving from this to that to that to that to that to that,
mhm.
up, down, all kinds of things that they have to deal with.
But we had a good time. We enjoyed living at Sunset Lake. We had lots of people who would come and visit us, and we would go cross country skiing.
I can't even remember Sunset Lake. Why don't I remember it? Didn't go in the right place or something?
It's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago. Yeah.
So that was our first real home PC, outside of the Radio Shack color computer. But a good part of what I ended up doing with the manufacturing folks, and I got to really know them pretty well, and they knew me, and we worked a lot together. So we had I had a good time working with them, and we had this long driveway at our house in Sunset Lake, and I had a snow thrower, which was.
So where was Sunset Lake at that time?
It was in Ashburnham.
It was what?
In Ashburnham.
In
Ashburnham.
Ashburnham.
Yeah, and you
Okay.
ended up working at Applewild School.
At Applewild School,
In
definitely.
Gardner. Yeah,
Yes.
so you ended up working there.
Well, I'm impressed that all of that had to do with that, with what I was doing, for that, because that's good that they've got an idea of that, and that's what it's like.
mhm.
And I think that kind of gets the others to say, well, you know what, maybe that wouldn't be so bad if I did it. Because
Uh-huh.
the people that are helping us, they've got to do it. Because otherwise we're done. We can't
Yeah.
do it. So that's impressed me.
So, so you were teaching science to all the different grades at Applewild. And then, but the guy that I worked for at Mohasco, Simplex, was a real asshole. He was not a nice person. So I got fed up, and I said, all right, I'm going to look for another job. So I interviewed for a position with Jerry Wilson in, where was it? Somewhere in the Boston area, somewhere outside of Boston. So it was a long commute. It was a little over about an hour.
You couldn't commute to anybody because they were all dead. But I'm sure that if they were gone, then somebody else was doing something.
So this was with Stratus Computer, which was a fault-tolerant machine that a lot of the telephone companies used to bill long-distance charges. So they were manufactured in Massachusetts and also in Ireland. So
That was one of the reasons why that was this, who would talk about that particular thing unless you had a reason. And that came back to what Joe was working
yeah,
and went right into that and went right straight to them and spent a lot of time that he was doing it at their place.
so I had to go to Ireland a week a month.
Yes,
I would go back and forth
that's insane.
every month.
Yeah, it's insane. I don't know why.
So I had an office in Blanchardstown, Ireland,
Yes.
just outside of Dublin. And
Oh, if you're going to do something like that, go right over there and skip the other place because that one, nobody knows about that one. You got to go to the one that everybody talks about all the time.
so I think I did that for about 5 years.
Really?
And I had a good time. I helped them out a lot with their manufacturing systems and stuff. And
So you were able to kind of get it into that whole
Yeah.
thing.
And I also had to. I used to, what I call build bridges, because
Yes, I think I can get to that. Go ahead, tell me.
so the people in Ireland and the people in Massachusetts didn't get along very well.
Ah,
Part of my job was to help them get along. So I worked with them, and we installed some new software. I forget what it was. and I had a good time, really did. So I think I did that for about 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, and then one day I took the afternoon off to go see Matt play soccer because he was having a soccer game. So he was going to school in Ashburnham. So since I had the afternoon off, I called where I used to work at Simplex, and I said, can I stop by and see how things are going? So I stopped there, and the manufacturing vice president was a really nice guy, and he was showing me around, telling me all the good things they were doing, manufacturing, and of all places, Gardner, Massachusetts. I think at that point it was in Westminster.
Yes, Westminster.
So I stopped by, and they were showing me around, and then I was sitting in the office of my old boss, and the manufacturing vice president stopped in while we were just sitting there having coffee.
I remember that there was a situation, and then there was this thing that was just like, okay, it's wonderful, or it's rotten, I don't know.
So, and I was getting tired of the commute.
Yeah.
Driving into Boston area every day, over an hour each way, and that's where I bought the Honda Del Sol, because I had that long commute, and I needed a fun car. So, so I'm in the office there with my old boss, and we were just chatting, and then the manufacturing vice president walked by with his entire staff, and he stuck his head in the office, and he told my old boss, he says, Jim Nickerson, I want Joe Harden back to work here. Give him whatever he wants. So I ended up going back to work at Simplex, and I had a lot of fun there as well. Because even though I had worked there before and I had helped them straighten out their manufacturing stuff, there was no one there to take care of it and make sure that everything was working properly. So I went back there, and again, I had a lot of fun. So that was going back to Simplex, from Stratus to Simplex for the second time. And then after I was working there for a while, I get a phone call from Jerry Wilson, my old boss at Stratus. And he says, Joe, you did a great job when you were working with us, and you helped build bridges and work with Ireland and Massachusetts. However, he was in a new company called RSA Security. And he calls me up and he says, Joe, I've got a great job for you. So I said, where is it? And he said, Singapore.
And he went, what?
Yeah, I said, Singapore is right near the equator. It's really too hot. I said, no way Sue and I would survive being in 100-degree heat all the time. So we let it go, and about a month later he called back and he says, okay, Joe, I got a job for you. He says, I said, where is it? He says, Brisbane, Australia. I said, Jerry,
Are you crazy?
I said, you know how far it is to Brisbane, Australia? It's like an 18-hour flight to get there. So I turned him down. Another month goes by.
He still didn't want it, probably.
He calls back, and he says, Joe, I've got a great job for you. I said, Jerry, where is it? He says, I'll tell you all about it on the airplane. I go, where's the airplane going? He says, San Francisco. I go, when do we leave? So then I went and I interviewed in San Francisco, actually San Mateo, and I really liked the job. I liked working for Jerry Wilson, and
that kind of just very tiny but There's something about it that I remember.
So so they offered me the job, and we accepted it. We said, all right, we're going to move to San Francisco. So we moved to San Francisco, and they put us up temporarily in this beautiful...
And you didn't take me with you.
Oh, yeah, we did.
We did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we got there, and we were there around 2001. We moved there in like in August, and we were staying in this temporary rent right on the ocean. It was a beautiful place. And then one day, Peter, who was going to college back in New York City, he calls me up. He says, Dad, he calls me up early in the morning, and he said, Dad, turn on the TV. So I turned on the TV, and that's when that was 9/11, when the planes hit the World Trade Center in New York City. And then we couldn't reach him again. All the phone lines were out in the New York City area. And you were horrified. You wanted to immediately move back to New York and be where Peter and Matt were. But we lived through that, and then after a few months, things calmed down, and we stayed in California for about 5 years. In the meantime, part of my job was to visit. I was responsible for the Asia Pacific area for RSA Security, and that included sites in San Mateo, San Francisco, Vancouver, Brisbane, Australia, Singapore, and where else? China, and Japan. Japan, and we had also sites in China too. So every quarter I would do sort of a big loop, and would go back to these sites and visit them, and I'd be gone for 2 weeks, and you'd be taking care of the kids. But it was a lot of fun. It was probably the most fun job I ever had. And also, RSA at the time they were buying small companies and integrating them into the company. And everyone had different kinds of computers and different software. And my team, who I encouraged to be creative, came up with a solution. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to standardize on what IBM RS-6000s or RS-9000s are, something like that, at each one of the sites, and then use what they call VMware to back up the systems across a high-speed data link between the sites. So we installed that, and we saved a lot of money and saved a lot of work, and that was cool. So at some point, though...
You had intelligence. That's what you had.
Yeah, but I also encouraged people to think, you know.
Yes.
And
I'm sure you did all of that, but I'm just looking at that little piece that's also there, because there's a lot of people who just, they won't make it with number 1 or 2 or 3. You got to keep at it and say, not yet.
Yeah. So I did a lot of traveling, and then RSA decided they were going to close the software development center in San Mateo and move all the jobs to Bangalore, India.
Oh.
So part of my job was to set up a software development center in Bangalore, India. So I had a small apartment in Bangalore, and I would go back and forth from San Francisco to India and back and forth, and then.
But just to those 2 places.
Just to those 2 places. Well, I still had the other places I had to go to too. So.
But they were going through the regular stuff. It was that. Okay.
So that was part of my job, and then after we finished the software development center, they were firing or laying off a lot of the people in San Mateo, including me. Because my job was moved to Bangalore, India, and I wasn't about to move to India.
Okay.
So
you had a reason. It's okay.
Yeah. So we ended up. So I was assigned part of the job was to go tell my staff that they were all being laid off. And so the manufacturing VP and the human resources VP and a few other people were there. And the day we were going to give everyone notice that they were being laid off. And then they said, you have to go tell your staff. I said, no, I can't do that. And they said, why? I said, because I'm getting laid off too. So, because my job was going away. So it was like really a hard thing, because I really liked working for RSA. And I knew the president of the company.
I knew that because I was listening to it every day. We would think about it and talk about it.
So I told them that I can't do it, and then the manufacturing VP and the HR VP said, you can't be laid off. You're too valuable an employee. So they laid me off for one day. And then they offered me a job to move back to Bedford, Massachusetts, where RSA was headquartered. Right? And in the meantime, we had bought the sailboat. So we had our great big sailboat in California. And
how did we wind up with that?
You know, we took sailing lessons when we were in California.
Oh, okay.
And we really got to like it. So we did that. And then they said, well, you got to move back. I said, well, okay, I need 5 weeks to move back. We're going to sail the sailboat through the Panama Canal and up the East Coast, and we'll, and then I'll get to Bedford. And they said, no, we can't do that. So I said, all right, well, we'll drive. It'll only take us a week. They said, no, we can't do that. You got to be there next week. So they flew me to Boston to work in Bedford. And a new job, a bigger job, more money, et cetera, et cetera. And you got left alone in California, and you had to handle the move, to move all of our furniture and everything. So we sailed the boat over to Oakland, where they were going to move it for us, and the company paid for all this stuff. And then I flew to Boston, and then you saw the movers out, and you had to take care of the kids at the time too. And then you ended up, and they moved our cars too. And then you and the kids.
I remember the words that you're talking about, yes.
So you and the kids flew back from San Francisco to Boston. And then I forget where we ended up living. I think we got a temporary rent to start. And then we ended up getting an apartment outside of Bedford, Massachusetts. So that was our latest move. And again, I was doing a lot of manufacturing stuff as well as infrastructure. And in the meantime, when I was working at RSA, so I was director of IT for Asia Pacific. And one day the CEO walks into my office and he sits down in my chair and he says, Joe, you're a smart guy, aren't you? I said, what am I going to tell the CEO? No, I'm not a smart guy. So he says, you're a smart guy. You know, the VP down the hall, he just resigned. You can be director of IT and facilities. So I ended up being in charge of facilities and IT for all the Asia Pacific.
Oh my goodness. That's a little bit more than you needed.
More than I sort of planned on.
Yeah.
So all said and done, moved back to Bedford, and then I was in charge of a lot of the places around the world.
Especially our local world.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that even, yeah.
So, beyond that, I was in this executive physical program. So I went over to Leahy Clinic one time and they did a whole bunch of tests on me to make sure I was healthy. And then we did the tests and I went back to my office and then they said, you got to come back. I said, why? We have a health issue, you have a health issue we have to deal with. So as it turns out, I had a heart problem. and I didn't know about it. And
They just assumed that it could have been.
well, they ran a bunch of tests, and they said we need to do put in a stent in by your heart.
Oh,
And
that's
so
an rather important idea.
yeah. So they said, you got to do this because, you like to sail a lot. You're sailing offshore, and you can't just go offshore because if you had a heart attack, you'd be dead because you'd be so far away from a hospital. So went in there to have the stent done, and then they were about to do that, and then they did some X-rays or something or other, or a CAT scan, and they found out that they couldn't do the stent because it was too close to my heart. So they said, we got to do a bypass. So they ended up opening up my chest and do open heart surgery. And I think you were flaking out. You were going crazy. And then I had like a 5-week recovery time and everything else. So in the meantime, RSA was purchased by EMC Corporation. And I was in charge of coordinating the transition between RSA and EMC. And the EMC was a horrible company.
Who was?
EMC Corporation. It was horrible. It was just really horrible. So then, and then they had really terrible customer service. And a lot of the employees, they hated working for EMC. And they had horrible coffee. They had horrible coffee. It was terrible. And I was used to having good coffee. So, I recovered. And then we were doing a lot of, again, mergers and acquisitions. So we had bought 5 companies in Israel. So, and again, they were all startups and they were all disorganized, but they had good, smart people working for them. So I had to go to Israel a few times. And one of the first times I was there, where we were located, there were rocket attacks from Hamas.
Where was this at what time?
This was in Israel.
This was what had happened.
Yeah. So every building in Israel had what they call a safe room. And when there was going to be an attack or some kind, they would have all the people go into the safe room because it was well protected. So while I was there, I got a phone call from Bedford saying, "You got to get out of there. You're being attacked." And I
shouldn't laugh because that was true.
It was very true. But the rockets were like a kilometer or 2 away, so it was pretty far from where I was.
But it's something.
Yeah, it was something. So I said, "Fine, I'm fine. Everybody's here is fine." Yeah, after a while, what happened was, EMC didn't like the job that I had, and they were going to consolidate with some of their other customer service desks around the world.
They don't seem to know what they're doing.
They didn't. They really didn't, and because they had horrible customer service.
It's because what they should know how to do, they don't.
Right. Well, they just didn't care enough. So I didn't like it at all, and they were cutting my budget to almost nothing.
Yeah, you've got to pretend this
Mm-hmm.
and go with it because we already made it so that you have to do it.
So in the meantime, my stock options from RSA, they matured, and I just went and I sold them. I sold the stock options, and I don't know, maybe $200,000 or $300,000, and then I quit. I just quit. So I'm not going to work for EMC.
Yep.
So That was the first time I retired. I think I was 55 years old. That was pretty early to retire. So then we went sailing. We got on our sailboat and we sailed down to the Caribbean, and we visited Peter. We sailed down through the Chesapeake Bay, the Delaware Bay, and all the way to intercoastal waterway, all the way to Pascagoula, Mississippi, where Peter was working.
Where is that?
It's down in Mississippi, down on
Okay.
the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, but who was working there?
Peter.
Peter, and he did that.
Yep, he was working down there.
Yeah, so that's right in the middle of it. You didn't have to pay for that.
No.
That was simple.
Right.
But you have to have that idea or something
Yep.
to get the attention.
So we sailed down there. Took a long, long time to sail there. And we sailed back up to the Boston area. And then we did some more sailing, or we went to Maine. We sailed up to Maine, and we had a lot of fun sailing. We really did.
Yeah, now that originally did get me kind of like, what's going on here? Because all I could get an idea of was that one small thing, because that's all that Joe was doing. He was
Yes.
going there, and he
Right.
had to go there. It wasn't like we could do this and go to dinner or something like that and just, deal with it the way it is. Not really, because we just had this, and we just had this happen. It's pretty weird.
So then I got bored.
You got what?
I got bored
You got bored, yeah.
because I'd retired, and we did a whole bunch of sailing, and now it's like, all right, what do we do now? So I ended up taking a job as what they call a regional technician for I think it was the 2010 census. I got a job with the U.S. Census Bureau. And
There is such a thing?
yeah, there is. So I had to go into Boston a lot, and I went to different sites around New England, and I helped out with the census. And they had computer problems. So since I was somewhat of a computer expert, I helped them out, and we solved a lot of computer problems. So that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. So we did that for a while, and then after I finished with that job, of all things, Jerry Wilson calls me up again.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "Have I got a job for you?" So where was it? It was in the Seaport District in Boston.
Oh,
So at that time, we were living on the sailboat in Boston Harbor. So I would take the water shuttle from our sailboat in East Boston, and I would take it right to where I was working. And I can't remember the name of the company, but they did a lot of good environmental stuff. So I was helping them out, trying to organize their help desk and try to improve their customer service. So went to work then for Jerry for a while, and then I was there just as a consultant, and then he hired me as a full-time employee. And to tell you the truth, I forget where I ended up going from there. So
I don't think it's okay. Nobody will get excited.
I'm gonna stop talking now and pause this thing if I can. So after working on the census, as I said, I went to work for Jerry at this company in the Seashore District of Boston. And then after that ended, I retired a second time. And we really had a big discussion about where we wanted to live. And after you and I talked about it quite a bit, we said we want to live in Albany. So we decided we were going to move to Albany. But first the sailboat was in Boston Harbor, and we had to bring it up to Albany. So we brought it up to Albany, and we got into a nice marina for a while. And then we decided before we move into an apartment, we had put our furniture in storage. We wanted to do some sailing in the Great Lakes. So we decided to do they call it the Little Loop. It's not the Great Loop. And we wanted to go out the Erie Canal, and we were going to go to Detroit on the sailboat because you wanted to show our sailboat to some of your friends and family. But we got halfway there. We got up to Syracuse. We went through like 40 or 50 locks, and we just got tired of doing that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So we bumped out from the Erie Canal up to Lake Ontario. And then we sailed across Lake Ontario, and then we sailed down where did we sail down to? We sailed down the St. Lawrence River. We went through a bunch of other locks.
I've found that to be very true. If I have to do anything that's similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know what are they doing with what they're doing that, because I remember getting close to something. Can't remember exactly where I was, but I was there and they were all ready.
But
so excited about it.
We had a lot of fun sailing down the St. Lawrence River, and we made some friends, and they invited us to a music festival in Montreal while we were there. And then we went to the music festival, and you did some birding. They were like birding tours. And then,
yes.
And then after that, we went down to the Richelieu Canal, which brought us from the St. Lawrence River down to Lake Champlain. And we got to Lake Champlain, and we looked around when there were the Green Mountains on one side, the Adirondacks on the other side, and it was just beautiful. And we decided this is where we want to be. So we found a marina on Lake Champlain, and we moved the boat to it, and then we drove down to Albany, and we found an apartment, and that's where we moved to. And that was the end of my computer career, because I don't think I ever went back. But it was fun. I learned a lot of stuff about computers, and a lot of dealing with people and that sort of thing. So we had some really good stuff. So that was the end of my computer career.